Good. Morning.
Morning, Rob. Thanks for taking the time today to answer these questions. For embroiderers looking to add revenue and profit to the business, there are so many choices, so much information, and it's really hard to decide and decipher all of it. Can you make it a little easier for them?
I'll try.
Perfect. So for this interview, I wanted to specifically cover DTG or direct to garment. My next interviews will cover adding more embroidery machines, adding screen printing, adding plotting laser, eyeline cutter, vinyl cutting, adding rhinestones, and finally adding embossing. So let's begin. First, what are the issues embroiderers face today?
I'm going to be general, but I think I can hone into something very specific because I have a unique point of view that a lot of people don't have. And the main reason is many salespeople are only relegated to one area, one particular part of the country, one region, one product, and one type of decorator. And with our business over the last 13 years, I've basically exposed ourselves or been in contact with, trained, sold to, delivered, conducted seminars with more than 3,500 embroidery shops or decorators. So when you start meeting these people face to face, in person, when you go to their shops and you have lunch with them, you have dinner with them, you start to talk about the issues that are out there. And I've been through many ups and downs with them. I mean, the current recession, 2008, 2009, knocked a lot of people out. The actual amount of bankruptcies for embroidery business was as high, if not higher, than restaurants, which is notorious for never making it past, the 5-year mark, more than 80% of them. That's where they get so many statistics from. So in talking with these people, I found there's very common traits amongst all of them. And number one is that embroidery is definitely here to stay, but it's saturated. There's so many people that can do it, and everybody's pumping out machines. Now, 10, 15 years ago, you had 3, 4 good suppliers. Now you have 15 suppliers, and now you have all the knockoffs of the great brand names that literally look the same. The logo is virtually the same. Everything's the software, the touch screen. They just, change the name. And the machines are getting better, even though some of those machines are not nearly as close because the Chinese aren't as good as the Japanese or whatever, but it's there. The main problem is that the price of the equipment has come down. A lot of people can buy used and repossessed and bankruptcy equipment, and more people have entered it because people tend to go to trade show and see embroidery, screen printing, direct to garment, and at the end of the day, they think that that's great. It must be good, everybody's doing it, when in fact, it's too late. That was always good when you're at the beginning of a cycle. When you're coming in at the end of the crest, okay, so most, if I could draw this here, I'm going to go very high tech now with my new, this is the caveman iPad, okay? So if you have a chart, most products take some sort of path like this, right? So they start here, and there's no acceptance, and nobody wants it, and then it keeps moving on, and finally, somewhere here, it starts to catch on, and then it really, really takes off, and then it plateaus. And embroidery is like over here, plateauing for a long time. So it's core, and it's here to stay, but there's a significant shift in the last 2, 3, 4 years, and that's all the technical garments. So all that, dry fit, dry wicking, moisture management, all that technical garment stuff is a huge pain to embroider because as soon as you embroider it, it's so thin it'll tend to pucker. And people will complain about that. So I had a customer in who bought a laser just the other day, and he said, I can't believe, like this Christmas I had at least 10, 15 complaints on orders for puckering. I never had that in my history of my embroidery career. And we look at it, and it's all this technical garment stuff. So that's one thing. The next thing is that most embroidery people are not formally trained in any kind of marketing. So they don't have any of the standard tools to use. They always think that price is their weapon and that they can sell it for cheaper than the next guy. The other issue is that a lot of small embroiderers never considered overhead. So you get to a certain point, it becomes impractical to have the business in your house, in a room, in the basement, in the garage. And you got to move into a proper location. The phone, the fax, the internet costs more out of a business location than out of the house. You're already paying for it out of the house, so it's kind of a freebie. You have your overhead to cover. You got rent, taxes, maintenance, insurance, which was covered under the house. And now you need more staff. And people aren't going to work for you like day here, day there. They want full-time income. So now you're an employer and you have a payroll. Because before, when you want to go to Disneyland with the kids, you left and there's nobody to pay and it was fine. But now you got 3, 4, 5 people. And that's the point where so many embroidery businesses get into big trouble. Now, if they can endure that, they find out that sales are flat. Because all of a sudden, how much can you embroider a year? How many golf shirts does your company need a year? So you got to come up with different decorations. You got to come up with innovative things. And those are the challenges that people face every day. So the reason that we're doing this interview is because people don't know what to choose. They're almost buying out of desperation. I can't tell you how many times the show that we just had this weekend, people came who are buying and purchased our laser, said, I came here to buy direct to garment, and I seen a bunch of them, and then I seen your machine. And I have to get it because that is what fits with embroidery better than anything else. Now that embroiderers are really in, and this conversation is about what equipment to pick to change that state. Go ahead. You got another question? I'm in my Larry King mode here. I just need my suspenders.
All right. Well, talking about embroidery, what is the #1 decoration to add to embroidery?
Oh. I'm very biased because the #1 decoration to add to embroidery is anything but embroidery and anything but what's common. So the most common thing that people are adding maybe today, and I think it's a lot based on price, is probably direct to garment, because you can get a direct to garment printer of some kind that is, $5,000 territory, and then you can get stuff that goes to somewhere between that and $12,000. And then you've got $12,000 to $30,000. And then you have the real sweet professional stuff, which is like the brand is called Cornet. I don't sell, I don't market any of it, so I see it from the point of view as the guy who's at a trade show. And then when I walk in the trade show, I see which service guys are working after the closing hours trying to get it to work. I can't tell you how many shows I've been in the last 5 years that half the time the machine isn't working at the show and there's always an excuse. But then the service guys are there first thing in the morning as soon as they can get in to try and get it going. They most often have more than one machine there, so there's always a backup because it's a very finicky technology. It's based on inkjet. So most of it is refined, large format inkjet printing that they take off the sexy HP skull, the sexy, brother skeleton, and then they put their own stuff on it, and then they create a platform to print on. And then they modify the print heads and things like that. So the technology is very, what's the word, MacGyver-ish. Because it's a lot of, you get a technical guy and he makes a brilliant conversion and they're selling it. And you're using what's the drivers for an HP, for a brother, for whatever. So a lot of it at the beginning was a nightmare for a lot of people. And if you read in the T-shirt blogs, it's like evident people are going insane. The problem with direct-to-garment, unless you go to the very high end, is fundamental that you don't want to do onesie-twosie business. Because screen printing was the way where you have a large screen and you literally physically draw the ink onto the garment and then it goes in different colors. It's a big, messy, cumbersome process. But it's still the best for anything with some sort of volume. Direct-to-garment is predominantly focused on doing low volume order. And low volume order, this is where the fundamental issue is. If I have a conversation with you for 12 shirts for your company, for your event, for your fundraiser, whatever, that conversation can often be longer than when I have a conversation with another business and they need 500 or 1,000 of something. And those orders exist. I mean, in Canada, I have customers getting orders of, 2,900 and 2,000 and 1,500. It exists. It exists more in the United States, specifically because there's 10 times more business, there's 10 times bigger companies, and there's 10 times more orders that are 10 times bigger. So fundamentally, there's way more chance of getting those because, we have a little company here, and then the same company in the United States is a chain in 50 states of exercise equipment, exercise facility, exercise, you know what I mean? Or burger or donut or whatever it might be, or a screw and nut bolt store. All the businesses, they have massive, massive chains. So that conversation to get a small quantity order is more cumbersome, longer, because that person is spending money personally. They're holding on to it tighter. And so a big mistake that I personally feel that embroidery shops make is that they say, ooh, we can do small order setup. But they forgot that, you know how many orders you need to make it worthwhile? They're not charging a minimum setup. It's the same artwork setup whether you do one, or you do 500 or 5,000 or 5 million. No difference. It's the same amount of paperwork through the system of your business, so that invoicing, that all the stuff you're doing with the checks and receivables and all that is all the same. It's another transaction. But you're talking about a $35 or $50 order, and if you are honest, if the person's like real honest with themselves, they'll find that they're spending over an hour from the very start until they're paid. So now, you didn't even make $45 an hour, which is the cardinal sin not to make that. You're making less because you got to put the cost of the goods in, you got to put all the other factors in. For what? For a onesie twosie, right? And if you do a small run, what are you going to get? You have to charge $12 a piece, $6 a piece. Now you got to run it. One shirt goes bad. There's one. It's already, gone. The money, the profit of that one or two. So the challenge is, how do you have something with virtually no setup? How do you do something that's directly related to embroidery? The trouble with embossing was always that it wasn't connected to the embroidery machine, so there was no connection in the brain saying, I can take the embroidery customer and convert him to this. Now people get it, right? The big thing is also rhinestone, etc., right? Because people like it. It's become common. They see it in the stores. Men are even wearing it. So they say, oh, you can get your logo in that. But it's so interesting. The biggest adopter of rhinestone were non-embroidery because they're so frickin' stubborn. And the most success came from the early adopters who knew and had no... I sound jaded, and I'm not, but you got to understand that most people are like a horse with blinkers, right? You deny that things are not getting better, so you hunker down and you do more of the same, which is getting the same result. When in reality, an embroidery business has the best opportunity to go to existing customers and give them something new. How many golf shirts do you really need? How many do you need? Why don't you get something that caters more to women? Women have like half or more of all the buying power of everything. Every time I'm in a car, I see a woman driving it. She's got to get an oil change. But I never see women's clothing at the dealership. I see 6 types of men's shirts, maybe 1 woman's shirt. It's starting to change, but it took years. But they're going. Spas, salons, anything to do with that you purchase for your kid. They buy the iPods and the iPads, and they buy the toys and the MP3 players, and they buy the TVs, and they buy the stereos, and they buy the stuff for the house. So why don't businesses cater more towards it? And when we started to hammer that home, all of a sudden the whole rhinestone market started to take up and get going. So direct to garment is a very fragmented market. There's a lot of little players. There's a lot of choices, and everybody says this is the best thing since sliced bread. This is the cat's meow. It's going to change everything. And in reality, all you're doing is you're buying a product, and this is fundamental, right? People will buy a cheap machine because the logic says it's less risk. That's like shooting yourself in the foot before you get going. I'm going to go in the cement business, but I'm going to buy the cheapest possible cement truck. How is that going to last? How is that fundamentally in the law of business going to work for you? And then people buy a really good direct-to-garment machine, and the ones who make the most money, I haven't seen in a bankruptcy. I probably could have missed some, of course. I haven't seen people who own the Cornet brand go bankrupt. It's the same way you see less Barrett owners go bankrupt. But that's the more expensive or most expensive embroidery machine. But those are the same people who fundamentally, when you go and you say, hey, that Joe down the street can do it cheaper. The Barrett owner, fundamentally, as a rule, as a law that I've seen, says, you know what? You're going to have to go to Joe. That's a great price because I can't do it for that. And he goes, well, I don't want to go to Joe. I said, I know, but this is my price. Yeah, but can't you match Joe's price? I said, no, I can't match Joe's price. Why don't you use him? Well, last time he messed up the order. He's not in business anymore. Well, that's why, right? Because he did a pathetic job, and he charged less, and it wasn't on time. The golf shirts don't help you when they need to be delivered this Wednesday, and you get them on Saturday. It's too late, right? But that's like a fundamental thing that's occurring all the time, and people know it. They're not in denial. Well, they're in denial, but they're not being honest with themselves and with the industry. So, we can't sell everything to everybody. We want to specialize. But the same token, we don't want to sell everything to everybody because we want the people who understand those business fundamentals. Listen, I can do an amazing job. I can do it better than anybody else. When I say I'm going to deliver it, I'm going to deliver it. And this is how I'm going to do it. And this is what it's going to look like. And if there's a problem, you can come to me. I'll take care of it. You know how many embroiders don't back up? You own the shirt now. You pay. You're done. And it looks terrible. They don't buy it. They don't take care of you. So you get what you pay for. Number one principle since the caveman started trading, right? So then there's the whole issue with printing on dark surfaces because you have to put a white base down. So it's almost like putting liquid paper on the whole product and then printing on the liquid paper. So it's gotten a lot better, but it's still really, I use the word fundamental a lot, right? It's still fundamentally a very finicky process, and it's normal because it's printing on a surface. You're not printing on paper. Printing on paper is beautiful all the time. Your substrate is white and it's consistent. And when you print direct to garment, you're printing on all different types of product, especially if the customer is sending you stuff. So now you got to get involved with having inventory and saying, listen, we only print on this because we guarantee the results on this. So you got to buy the T-shirt from me. You say, oh, but I buy that T-shirt for the same price you do. Are you going to mark it out? Oh, okay, I'll give you that T-shirt as long as you pay this much for the printing. And this whole negotiation process goes. And now you can get direct-to-garment in any corner the same way you get embroidery. Why? Because the entry-level cost to get into it was low. And therefore, it gives you a lot of choices. And it creates competition in the market, but not the healthiest competition because everybody's killing each other, right? Limitations of DTG would be that you're competing in a saturated market with a lot of people in there, and you're offering something that everybody else offers, and you're competing for little tiny bits of the market at a time. And you've got to set up an artwork and software, so you've got a lot to deal with. And what's the maximum you can order? What's the maximum you can get? Because when you go to the seminars, they always show you the great rates. And people will, I mean it in a nice way, ignorantly calculate $30 a shirt. And ask anybody on one of those blogs, does anybody get $30 a shirt all day long for multiple orders? And watch how many people go, you're joking. You'll get somebody who does like a dog show and puts a print on. But now you got $1,500 worth of booth costs. You got electrical for $300-400. You've got to spend your whole time there the day before to set up. You got to have a show booth. The show isn't every day of the week, every day of the year, I mean. It's just 1 or 2 days in a week. Now you got to go on a show circuit. So you go set up at a show, you can quite easily have 3, 4, 5, 10 grand. When us equipment guys do a show, 50, 60 grand sometimes like that. Because of all the drayage, all the setup, all the complexity of the size of the booth, all the people, like that. So imagine if you're a little 10 by 10 booth and you're not going to get away with less than 5, 6, 7 grand per show. How many shirts is that, right? That's a lot of shirts, 210 shirts plus at a show to get that money at full pop. But we're talking about every day making a revenue. We're talking about making no less than, this is something important I never mentioned to you. Of those embroiders, those businesses I looked at, most of them worked more than 60 hours a week and didn't take out 50 grand a year. Wow. Guess what? I would rather go work at Subway and get off at 5 and go home and watch, Law and Order or something. I don't want to work 60, 70 hours a week and get paid that. That's less than minimum wage. Get a job then, right? Yeah. So that's what's interesting. And it's hard because sometimes you look at these businesses and if they don't make a change, they're having less than a job, right?
Interested, and you seem like you're in your groove and all. Would you mind if I ask you a few more questions?
Is Larry King getting a groove?
Now, what would you say about adding more embroideries?
And more embroidery machines. I just talked about a big issue with embroidery. So I understand if you have one head, you've got to get more to be able to be profitable. And every business always has that dilemma, do I get more? But you're getting more of the same, more of 45 bucks an hour, more of 55 bucks an hour. If you have, like, here's the fundamentals of embroidery. You have one head, and it does one piece, and that piece has 10,000 stitches, and that piece takes, you run it at 800-900 stitches. And this is another thing. People say, oh, the machine runs at 1,200 stitches. It doesn't, because the thread breaks. So you want to do, 28 thread repairs and rethread it. You can't run it that fast because it doesn't work. It's always nice when you see at the show and they're running it on something. But when you take something to a show, you've prepped that file and you've tweaked it and you've tested it. And it's not like the 10 different logos you got to do today. That's a perfectly tuned file in a perfect scenario, and that's not reality. So, and then your thickness of garment, the backing that you're using, the thread you're using, and the green thread, you're using a different brand because you didn't have it in that color and it behaves different, you're not used to the tension. So there's 100 technical factors that come in. When you have one head and you're going to run it at 6, 7, 8, 900 per minute, then you can only produce so much. So now you get, a 6 head. I know this is 5, but pretend it's 6, okay? And you get another 6 head. You're getting 6 turns for that same effort, okay? But if you've got 4 orders in a row that have a high stitch count, you're not going to get a full 3 turns per hour because you didn't process it, right? So all of a sudden the revenue goes down, but the cost of the 12 heads, the 2 6s, still cost the same. And if you look at the thing that makes the embroidery business work, you'll see that the first shift, when it's running, needle's not moving, no money's being made, right? When the first shift is running, then that pays for the bills. The second shift tends to be where the profit margin comes in. But now you also have a second set of staff. You also have night shift to deal with, and you run yourself ragged. So a big organization has managers and human resources and all this. A small organization, it's like you, me. We're doing everything. We got to know everything. We got to get good help. We got to keep good help. We got to pay them properly. We got to train them. That's all our time, our energy, our effort. So adding more embroidery machines is adding more 45 bucks an hour, which means you got to hustle more to get the same kind of sale because you got to get more of that sale because now you have that overhead to cover. And some of the embroidery shops that are there was a shift pre 9/11, and everything was moving to Mexico. And 9/11 hit, and it was like overnight, everything went to China. And that's understood that it's going to go there because the labor cost is so low. But the fundamental rules of the business in the developed countries, Canada, USA, and Europe, is small, medium run, custom work, quick turnover. That's never going to go because that's not efficient to get on a container or by air or whatever. I need that now. I need it yesterday. I need it for this. I need it for that. I need it custom. I need this. So that will never go away. It's just that there's a big pool of people competing with it. And a lot of the older guys that still exist with the older machines, their buildings paid for, because they were in the business in the heyday. All their machines are paid for because they paid for it years ago when they were making huge dollars. So they can afford to hang on, and they're not going to make any big changes because they're fine. They made their money. They're just dealing with what they want to deal with. Adding equipment makes, and it has to be revolutionary because adding the same is going to give you the same results, just more of it. But it's still 45, 50 bucks an hour. So I disagree with adding more embroidery machine. I agree with adding the laser because the laser takes embroidery out of the industrial age. It does what no human hand can do in terms of cutting, for applique, reverse applique. The whole etching process, that requires no hooping whatsoever. When you look at videos of other lasers on the market, more than often they're sped up. They're time-lapsed. We don't do that at all. That's like live. We etch that in 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 seconds, or if it's complicated, in a minute. That's live. You know, try and embroider that size design in a minute, doesn't exist. And adding more embroidery is not the solution, because it's going to take a long time to pay for that equipment. I'd rather you get something that will create a high amount of profit and pay for that additional embroidery. And remember, when I use the laser, for example, in combination with the embroidery machine, I reduce stitch count. I do full front decoration, which is a higher sale. So instead of doing $2.35 and $9.95 and $2.10, I'm doing $7 to $14. But that $7 to $14 decoration is less stitches than on embroidery, left chest embroidery. Because left chest embroidery could be 5, 6, 8, 10,000 stitches, and my full front decoration and all the samples. And what I'll do in the video is we'll add in pictures as we're talking to explain stuff. Those are like 1,500 stitches, 2,000 stitches. But I'm getting $7 to $9 to $10 to $14 to $12 range for that decoration. So all of a sudden, I can do 5 turns per hour on a $9 decoration, but if I do what I used to do, I'm doing $2 decorations, and I'm got, you know, barely 3 turns per hour. So my revenue goes sky high and my profitability. So when we quote people that you can do, you know, no less than $150, $100, $120 minimum per hour, all the way up to $600, that's completely realistic. People don't understand that when you laser etch on the technical garment, you put the logo in the spot, you put the website on the panel here, whatever, that's taking 5, 6, 7 seconds. I'm not even touching the embroidery machine, but I'm selling to the person who would have bought embroidery. I'm giving them something new and different. And because the laser isn't a $6,000 plotting laser from China, not everybody can do it, which on those plotting lasers, I'll cover it a little bit later, you can't get the garment in, you can't register it, there's no, how do you get the right spot? The smoke is drawn to the garment even if it would work, and all these other issues come into play. So we want to do something that's completely different and unique. So I say never buy more embroidery. Make sure you buy a technology that updates the embroidery, takes it out of the industrial age, because it has not changed for 40 years. And if you buy an embroidery machine next week, it's still going to do the same thing. It's going to stitch. It's going to be a little bit quieter. Touch panel is going to be a little bit nicer. Software is going to be a little bit better. It's still embroidery. You're still not going to get $18 for it.
It's still a 40-year-old technology, right? Not
going to change. Hasn't changed. Okay.
Now, if you don't mind, what do you think about adding plotting lasers or eyeline cutters?
Okay, an eyeline cutter is basically a knife that travels on a plotter. A plotter is a device that you can put vinyl through, and it has like a, think of it as an automated X-Acto knife. Okay. And so it'll change and cut the letter as the material comes through, right? I'll put a video in or something like that in the thing. But basically, the vinyl flows through a machine like this, okay, and as it's flowing through, the knife is zipping across here, doing the cutting pattern that it needs to. Sometimes it lays on a table, and it's held down, and it cuts along the table, and then you weed it. You pull out the part you need or you don't need, and you end up with a transfer, a sticker. So the Eyeline has been a core product in the tackle twill. Tackle twill is all the, you know, jersey lettering, all the high school team lettering stuff. But that product is woven quite stiff, and it has like a backing that's laminated on the back for adhesiveness, you know, for glue. It's an adhesive, and so it's stiff to cut. But when you go onto the website and you come to the show or you go in the showroom, we hardly use tackle twill. Why? Because everybody and their uncle does that already. You can buy an eyeline cutter used for a couple grand. But what you're doing is you have to stop the embroidery machine. You have to stitch out the letters. So if you want to do cougar, right, you got to stitch out the C, the O, the U, the G, the AR. And then you got to take your letters while your embroidery machine stops. The girls, the guys have to go and put each and every letter down. What happens when the embroidery needles aren't moving? No Goomba, right? No money. And then you got to start it off slowly and check each one and make sure that works. So people hate that.
It's high maintenance.
Oh, it's huge high maintenance, labor intensive. Great overseas. You make $50, $25 a week, whatever, and it costs nothing to live. But, you know, we all want our four-wheel drive Hummers and pickup trucks and whatever we want here, so we can't live off that money. So at the end of the day, are still doing something that everybody else is doing. And the shift has to come in your own mind to not do the same as what everybody else is doing. Do something different. The difference is the following. When you do something different, you have a huge advantage. Small disadvantage, huge advantage, same thing. Disadvantage is none of your customers know you're doing something new. It's easy. You can let them know. You do all kinds of simple marketing mailing. Why do we guarantee that the equipment's profitable in 90 days or less and nobody in the industry does it? Because nobody gives you any marketing tools on how to do it. And it's insane that those companies, they're based on knocking out products, selling it, flipping it, moving on, go to service. They're not coming out there for 2 days on site, setting you up training and plugging you into a system that helps generate that revenue. You know, somebody said to me, when you told me, the customer that bought a laser, when you told me that I can't find my laser, your product's used, I went and looked, and I thought, geez, you must not have sold a lot. It's the contrary. Literally the contrary. I may not have sold a gazillion of them, right? But after 13 years, every year, millions of dollars of equipment, and you can't find it used, it's because the people are making money with it, or they made their money, and now they can be happy to look at it because the simplest, easiest money they ever made with it, and every time they touch it, it makes more money. And it's long time paid for. So why should they sell it?
They shouldn't.
Yeah. But that's the fact, right?
Yeah.
So that's the main reason. What else you got on your list of questions?
Vinyl cutting.
Same thing as Eyeline, but a vinyl cutter is working with the stiff plastic PVC type material, and it's you're cutting a pattern, and it's a form of decoration, but it's not core. It's not core in decoration for. Excuse me. It's not core decoration for corporate logos. Okay. There's a solutions product where you can print, like inkjet-wise, a logo and put it through the vinyl cutter, cut it out, and heat seal it on. But it's not, it's just a flat rubber sticker. It's like putting a sticker on the thing. So it doesn't appeal to everybody, and not all logos are conducive to looking nice, and you always have to put it on a white background. So now you got a nice, elegant shirt, and you got to put, like, white stuff on it. So I'll insert some pictures in there of what that looks like. Okay?
Now, adding rhinestones.
Rhinestones are very popular. Remember I said before that the biggest adopters of rhinestone were non-embroiders, and they stole that market. Embroidery has always fundamentally been a great customer because they had to make a big purchase. It was the most expensive type of decoration to get into when you bought a lot of machines. So the natural thing is to go to those people because they're used to buying expensive stuff. But they were on a high horse as an industry and made really good money for a really long time. And some people are brainwashed to think that that's the only decoration. And then they don't pick something. This is key. You have to pick something. If you're an embroiderer, the best thing to do is to revitalize what you offer in embroidery by updating the technology. So getting a laser to work in conjunction, the right laser, because the wrong laser is a big headache too, right? And remind me to cover that topic right after this. When you buy a laser that works in conjunction with the embroidery equipment, you update everything you can do. You can do applique, reverse applique. You can do combination of those both. You can do etching with applique. You can do etching alone. You can do all the techniques with applique, because every different material you use, you can make it very distressed or very clean and neat and very corporate looking. So, people say, where do you get your material? We go to like Joann Fabric, and we go spend $200, $300, $400 and buy everything we like, and then we take that back and we incorporate it into the designs, and people go, wow, didn't know you could do that. So you can do crazy stuff that your imagination was the limitation, in fact, right? And you can do beautiful full front decorations. And we are geared towards more subtle decorations, and we're geared to more relaxed wear. So, people get stuck in the mindset, only collegiate type look. My corporate customer doesn't want that. My corporate customer doesn't want the American Eagle Hollister look. Well, then don't offer them that. Yeah. but it's silly not to have it in your repertoire, your book of resume of all the stuff you can do, and go capture it. Because as an embroiderer, you'd be the only one in that region, in that town. People are buying more local. They are focused on buying from the guy that's in their community contributing. And they can't buy small orders across the country because it's a pain in the butt. You want to be able to get it now from the guy that knocks on your door. So they have a unique, huge opportunity that they need to capitalize on as an industry and get off, the old donkey and get on a nice, sexy racehorse and do something different for a change. You don't always want to have the carrot. You want the thing to take you somewhere, but you don't want to have to force it with a gun to its head to move, or a carrot or whatever, right? So
now also, how many different types of lasers are there on the market today, and what kind of laser would someone be looking to buy?
Okay, so the first type is, the oldest type is the plotter laser, and the plotter laser is basically, like a box, and it has a lid, and when you open up the lid, there's a gantry that goes this way, and one that goes this way. So basically, when you would hold, there's a laser coming up here, and there's a set of mirrors, so the laser comes up, hits the mirror, goes over here, and bounces off the other one. So what happens is you've got a little head, and this head moves, but the laser's spewing out of it. And it's a very small little focal product. Yeah. So if you would look at it, and I exaggerate it, you've got something that's like this big, with the lasers getting into, and there's a little tiny glass over here, and there's a little tiny beam. This is too big, but you can't see it otherwise. There's a little tiny beam, and then here's your work surface. And now when you want to do something like etching, and there's videos on YouTube that'll do it, you got to go left chest, get the point, get it? 15 minutes of that. But how are you going to get this exact spot on that table? Then you got to fold this garment, and you got to rig up something, you got to know where to go, right? And the next thing is, all of a sudden, you got to lower the table inside. Now, where's the starting point? So the setup is atrocious and almost impossible. And what you want to do is you want to combine it with embroidery. So now you need to take it off the embroidery machine in the hoop and put it in the laser, and it has to sync up. So with our technology, it's like you press the button and it knows that it's head 1 from machine 1. Head 2 from machine 1, head 3 from machine 1, and our laser moves to that. Our laser moves because we have a galvo system where we make a small movement with the mirror, but that goes to here, right? So the tiniest of movement, when we etch this, we go, and in 6, 7, 8, 12 seconds, the whole thing is done. So that's massive, right? Because you make at $1.60 to $1.50 per hit in a decent quantity, 1,000 and up. That's worthwhile if you're doing one every 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds. Yeah. If you're doing 12 of a shirt, I want to have virtually no setup, but I want to charge a minimum setup fee for artwork, whatever. It's different, right? Embroidery people don't even want to pay for that anymore. That's another thing, because the other guy offers the digitizing for free. That's to create that disc which has the sewing information. And so now this is different. Well, Joe, this is not embroidery, this is laser, so we have to create a file for it. It's different. Well, I don't like paying for setup. That's fine. It's $8 a piece then. And 12, because you take the $50 and you divide it into the 12 pieces or whatever, plus the thing, then it works out the same. So it's not a problem to do that, but you make it in-house. You don't, excuse me, you don't sub the disc out, the artwork out overseas and get it the next day from Indonesia back, and then stitch it out quick and see if it works. You do it right then, right on the spot on a sample piece, and knock it out the same day. The customer that's on YouTube, I said, Danny, I said, do you feel bad charging $90 for that marble tile? He goes, no. And I go, well, why? He says, first of all, on my plotting laser, that was, depending upon the design, 45 or 90 minutes worth of work. I charge $90. Back to the $45 an hour, right? So, on your laser, because he bought it now, he says, I did that in 3 minutes. If I sell it for $85 or $75 or $95 instead of $90, I don't sell any more or less. Yeah. They still want it, they still need it. My problem is I don't have 90 minutes, 45 minutes to get it in every day because I'm booked solid. But I have 3 minutes all the time to do it. So I don't feel bad because I'm doing what they need. I can do it the same day. I can do a quicker service than anybody in my whole town because I'm the only one with the laser. And I do something unique, and I can always fit it in. But I couldn't do it any other way. So that's why he uses the laser for many other things that are not embroidery related. He uses it on wood, he uses it on metal, he uses it on marble. So I open up the whole spectrum of decorations, because if you're focused in your town and your area of doing schools, you can create Students of the Month awards and on marble. So you make a nice big plaque, but then every month you send them like a drink coast size, type of plaque. You can do wood gifts with frames and boxes and wine cases, and you can do all kinds of eco-related things because you're not adding any color. You're just making a tan cotton bag darker. You're making a piece of cardboard darker. So you do things that look very cool, that are eco-friendly, that put their logo on, and that give, that has touch to it as well. Because cardboard ends up looking like chocolate. It gets darker, And that's the idea. I've seen embroiders that physically changed in appearance because they loved their business. They were sapped and sucked dry from their business, and that my equipment changed that. My father always said, I'd rather be rich and healthy than poor and sick. I can't argue with him, right? So you feel a lot better when you're doing something and you're making money and you're doing well at it than if you're busting your butt every day, 60, 80 hours a week, and you're taking home less. Listen, embroidery prices haven't gone up 10, 12, 15 years. It's very impossible to find somebody who actually made a reasonable price increase. The price of gas, car, food, thread, electricity, rent, taxes, there isn't anything else that hasn't gone up. 10 years ago, gas was, 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, gas was $1 a gallon. My computers cost less, right? But everything else went up 3, 4 times, but not embroidery prices. If you just go by gas and water and food, shouldn't my embroidery prices be $12 for a left chest instead of $1.95 when 2 years ago it was $2.25 and $2.35 before that? So it's backwards, and you've got to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. You've got to stop doing the things. I don't know who said it. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results, right? Don't do the same thing. Get something different. Were there any other questions on there, or equipment? Did we cover all that?
I just wanted to know also about adding embossing.
Embossing is changing the shape of something. Disadvantage to embossing is you need a mold or a die because you're pressing the logo into the substance of the garment. People have always been afraid of that, but when you would do a sheet of artwork with 4, 5, 6, 8 logos on it, and you submit that sheet to the die maker, then it nets out to be $15 to $25 to $35 per die for left chest. So it's actually stinking cheap, and you physically get a medal made in America. So you send it by email. And overnight, let's say from Michigan to wherever you are in the United States, you get it in an envelope, and it's ready to go for embossing. So you can't do that instantaneously. Laser, I can do instantaneously right away. I can make the design and go into it. With embossing, you have to have, a 72-hour window. You get the artwork, get it approved, email it, and then get the courier back. But I don't want to do overnight all the time. So a lot of the customers, what they do is they get into a routine, and every Wednesday, they ask the company, only ship my dies on Wednesdays. So until midnight on Wednesday, until you get in the morning, because they can do same day when it's in at a certain time. So for example, let's say everything prior to 8 in the morning Wednesday that you receive, put it all on one sheet. And then they send out the whole sheet, so it's really cheap to do it. Again, it's uniquely different than all the other decorations. And you can do other products. It's really, really nice on all the technical, all the synthetics. They come out very, very nice. It doesn't exist with other decorations that are more difficult, right? So you can't always get that tone and tone, that look. You can raise things up and you can stamp it down. That's Permaboss stands for permanent embossing. That's what we started the business as years ago. It's been a very core thing. It's taken like a long time. In this chart, if I were to tell you, I would say rhinestones is like right about here somewhere. I would say that embossing is somewhere in that vicinity. And I would say the laser is right over here because of the acceptance of it. And so, we're talking about, because this is 1999 here, let's say. And this is, 2010. So you got like this window where you have the most amount of chance for making the money the easiest, faster than anybody else, when you would adopt one of those three technologies that nobody else has. Which is my number one? Of course, it's the laser, because when you've been in so many businesses and you're so in sync with what they're doing, what they're struggling with, and then I physically go out and make a solution based here in North America. All the parts are American-based. Software is written here in Canada, so there's none of those crazy language messages and stuff like that. That makes a big difference, because it's from the ground up built for embroiders, and everybody else basically has taken some other product, kind of like the way the inkjet came from paper and made it work for t-shirts. They've taken laser from other industry, and now they're backwards engineering it to get embroidery to fit in. And it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. You need to look from the sitting in the shoes of the embroidery shop and how they move their product, how the product flows, and then make the laser based on those criteria. That's more expensive than taking something and recycling it. And that's, I think, what we've done with the laser. Okay? So now, do you want one?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Any other questions?
No, that's all.
Okay.
I'd like to thank you for taking your time today.
No, my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Rob Harbour, president of Permaboss.com.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rob.
See you.